Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Financial First Aid. Today, I have the honor of having keynote speaker, teacher, best-selling author, former attorney. He tags himself as recovering attorney and entrepreneur, Adam Markel. Adam's mission is to provide individuals and organizations with the tools to become and leverage the power of resilience to build long-term success. His talks provide actionable insights on the relationship between resilience and performance, work-life balance, and the role of stress management in improving mental health, employee engagement, productivity, and even happiness. His in-person and virtual keynote speaking events create a cultural and environmental context for effective leadership in the face of pandemic change. And welcome to my podcast, Adam. It's such an honor for you to be here.
Vera, I'm so happy to be on your show, and thank you for inviting me. That
You
was a mouthful there that you read.
Well, I took it directly from your own website. And just so people know, you also have a podcast, and we'll maybe get into that a little later on at the end when I ask you how people can get in touch with you, because I love to promote my guests, whatever it is they're doing. I love to promote them as well. So, what is the primary focus of your company? What's the name of it, first of all?
Well, our company's called More Love Media, and the primary focus is just like the name suggests, more love. We want to contribute more love in the world, and that's across every channel of business that we are engaged in. And I couldn't be more committed to that mission. I think it's business and love are actually really closely related things. We can maybe talk about that if we want to, but yeah, we're just putting more love into the world through our services, and we work with organizations on their developmental, on their employee resilience, so individually and organizationally, how it is that you create more resilient cultures is the essence of our consulting work. And I keynote speak to organizations on that topic a lot as well.
Wow. Okay. Well, that answers that question. The primary focus of your company. What motivated you to go into to being an entrepreneur?
I think it's really, having started this when I was 15 years old, not this, what I'm doing, but on this path to entrepreneurial pursuits, it began when I was trading baseball cards. I would go to conventions and spend $75 to get a table, a booth, at a convention, and sell my baseball cards for more money, hopefully, than it cost me to do that whole thing. And I got pretty attached to the idea that I was the one in some control of my destiny. And I'm a bit of a recovering control freak, not just a recovering attorney, but a recovering control freak too, which I think those two things kind of go hand in hand in some ways. And that's the thing about being an entrepreneur, is that it's about freedom for me. My own sense of just being in uh, free to do and free to be, and also in some level of control about my destiny. So if it goes well, or if it doesn't go well, either way, I feel like it's within a measure of my own doing. And I'm not saying that, if you're in a job or you're in a career path, I've had jobs as well. They can also create great freedom when you get to a certain level. I just never really stayed in an organization long enough to experience that same level of autonomy and freedom that owning my own business has provided.
Oh, great. Okay. And so kind of give, if you would, our audience of how you kind of went from being a recovering attorney, or attorney, I should say, and being, locked in somewhat to a firm to where you're at now. How did you kind of make that whole transition? And in other words, how did you make that pivot? Which, by the way, is the name of your book, Pivot, which I had the pleasure of reading. So give the audience a little story behind that, please.
Yeah, it's interesting because just recently, and I love the question. I was reading this book, which had me thinking a little bit differently about some things. And there's a part in this book called "The Honest Truth About Being Dishonest." And I'm blanking on the name of the author. I've literally just finishing the book. I think his name is Ayers. But there's a section where he talks about this cause and effect relationship between our preferences and our behaviors. And I think more of the conventional wisdom is that when we have a preference for something, like we desire something or where we are interested in something, then our behaviors are the result of our preferences or those desires. So we respond to what we prefer by behaving in a certain way. And then there's another school of thought that's less sort of prevalent, where there's that our actions or our behaviors actually then will dictate our preferences or influence our preferences. So it's sort of like, we going at it from one direction, from the front to the back or from the back to the front.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think when I was a lawyer, one of the things that I was experiencing that was that my own actions, the behaviors that I had adopted as an attorney, were having me prefer a certain way of dealing with people. For example, I would be easily agitated, easily angered. I was very, very, very opinionated. I was seeing the world through the lenses of right and wrong and all that kind of really absolute stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was feeling funky on the inside for me. There's a lot of ways to describe it, but I would wake up in the morning and put my feet on the floor and want to crawl back in bed. I would have tough time getting to sleep at night. I would take Ambien. For a couple of years, I took Ambien just to get to sleep. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and, a thought would come into my head about something, some case or some client or whatever, some worry, and I couldn't even get back to sleep. And so I was waking up in the morning and feeling this sort of anxiousness or this anxiety, which I think a lot of people can identify with right now in the midst of, what has been a protracted period of disruption and a pandemic and a lot of loss and a lot of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people can identify with feeling that way in the morning. And I just did it for more than months. I did it for years. I just sort of dealt with that feeling, ignored that feeling. It ultimately put me in the hospital on a Saturday thinking I was having a heart attack, feeling my chest so tight and constricted and I'm sweating and, feel like my heart's on the outside of my body. And I didn't have a heart attack. Fortunately, was, very, very lucky that I had an anxiety attack, which today for me to even say I was lucky to have an anxiety attack or lucky to have had a panic attack is so foreign from where I was back then. Where I was back then was I got to make sure nobody ever finds out about this. This is, I can't be weak. I can't be vulnerable. I can't have anybody see me. My ego wouldn't allow it, that anybody would see me as being as frail as I was in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was embarrassed. And now I realize what a gift that was, what a blessing that was, how important it was that I went through that period, that low period, so that I could in fact pivot, which is what the book Pivot is about, is where I took that information and that feedback, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and decided to leverage it, to do something with it, to utilize it, to not just sort of, brush it under the rug, which I tried to do, by the way. I didn't just kind of it wasn't like one of these epiphany moments that told me, oh, this is what's wrong and this is what you do to correct it. Right. I knew there was something wrong for sure. Right. I had no clue what to do to correct it. Right. So the book is about the path out of that darkness and into a place of greater clarity. And today I feel like the actions that I take, the behaviors that are more commonplace for me, are the ones that drive the feelings of connection, of love, of unity, of giving, of generosity, of gratitude. Those are the things that I'm driving through my behaviors now. Whereas when I was a lawyer, the behaviors I was taking then they were driving feelings of anger and anxiety and competition and, destroying other people. And, it's just totally different. You can see those are two different worlds. And
Yes.
I'm not suggesting that lawyers have to operate the way I was operating, but how I was operating was leading me in a place that was dark and not good. And there was something that inside of me, thankfully,
Mhm.
I say thank God for the fact that I had that moment to pause.
Right.
And that pause turned out to be, life-changing for me.
That's fantastic. Wow. Yeah. Was there, once you decided to make that pivot to go into something totally different than what you were doing, was there ever a time when, you really felt discouraged, or you felt like, maybe I made the wrong choice. Maybe I should go back to, practicing law, because, I know there's that time period where, if you're making a decent living at doing one job, and it doesn't have to be, practicing law, but whatever your job is, and you say, oh, you know what, I think I want to open a business or be an entrepreneur or whatever, you get that feeling of angst, like, am I doing the right thing? I'm not totally sure. When you, if you did, I mean, did you ever get in that place? And if you did, how did you kind of push yourself through it?
Yeah. Vera, only a couple of dozen times. I mean, not,
Right. Like you said, you said to yourself, you said, it wasn't an epiphany, but I knew I had to change.
Yeah, exactly. And even if it was like a light bulb moment, quote unquote, it doesn't tell you what the road ahead is going to be like. You have no
Exactly.
idea.
Yeah.
So pivoting became not just a one-time thing for me. It became my pattern, my 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 skill set even. And that's what I share with people. Pivoting is a skill, very much so. It's really constantly looking at the opportunities as they are in the moment, and not kind of painting yourself into a corner. I mean, I have had those moments where I go, law is just such a steady thing. I mean, it's not changed much in hundreds of years. The laws don't change quickly. The judges and the adversaries and the system itself is very stable and, really doesn't change much. And in that stability, you get, there's predictability.
Yes.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, in an entrepreneurial world, you have almost no predictability. There's
Yeah.
almost no stability.
Yes.
It's the opposite of that.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've questioned, because I thought, geez, man, 20 plus years of practice and law school and passing the bar exams and everything that went into it, you know, you could get lured in. I could have been lured into this sort of idea that, I've got so much sunk into this. They
Yeah.
call it the sunk cost fallacy, that I can't possibly change. So I broke free of that. I got to get out. But then it's not like I never look back and go, hey, that would have been just so much easier to not give up all that career capital in the pursuit of something or starting something from scratch.
Right.
But here's the thing too, Vera, is that I lean on my legal experience now a lot
Right.
in the work that I do, and not just because of our our company's need for using the law or contracts or negotiating deals and things, but with my clients as well, and in the even in my keynote examples of things. I speak to a lot of lawyer groups, lawyer associations, and I talk to them about subjects involving their mental health. We know that lawyers are among the most unhappy in their professions. They are susceptible to substance abuse issues, whether it's drinking or it's drugs or depression, anxiety. I mean, a whole host of things. And when we are depleted in those areas, when our reserves are depleted, we are not resilient. And when we're not resilient, we tend to screw up more. We tend to make a lot more mistakes. We tend to hurt people, not by intention, but we do it. We
Hmm.
make poor choices. We are impatient. We're emotional, and all the kind of things that don't really make for good lawyering.
Right.
So the good news is that, and what I've now seen is that I didn't it's even though I spent a lot of time in one career and I'm not in that career to now in that profession, I utilize those things. And I think that's a thing people should know, is that if they choose to make a change,
Right.
whether it's a small pivot that leads to another small pivot, or it's a slightly larger pivot to begin with, you're going to make use of. You can make use of everything that you've experienced and learned to this point. It doesn't have to be a sunk cost, because it's something that can pay dividends and contribute to your growth personally and professionally in the future.
That's a great answer, because that was actually my next question, which is, I mean, you've helped thousands of entrepreneurs and you've helped thousands of businesses, kind of build their business. And my question is, what would be the number one piece of advice that you'd give them to help them start their business, or if they're already in business, to help them build up their existing business? And I think that was a great piece of advice. Use what you learned up until this point and see how that wealth of knowledge actually can assist you with moving forward with your pivot. It's funny, because I was talking to somebody about that this morning, and I told her the same thing. She's a nurse practitioner. I said, a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't know, and you can utilize that to move forward with what you're doing. So anyway, back to what I was saying. What kind of advice would you give them? Just to say, you're a startup, or you're in business for yourself, and what kind of advice would you kind of give them? Just this one little nugget you might give.
Yeah, you know what? Um, there's so many moving parts in business that I would say that um, it's really about your own attitude about growth, and
Mhm.
your ability to be open to embrace not only change, but embrace the wealth of information and experience that you've yet to attain. So it's like having looking at things through beginner's eyes, looking at it, through it like an apprentice would look at the opportunity to learn, and to adopt that attitude of constant and never ending growth, constant and never ending improvement. Kaizen is the Japanese term for change good. And the law of betterment, the law of improvement is the law of change. You can't, in the universe, things get better and they change, or they improve because they change. And that's the universe is constantly expanding. Life is all about things becoming more than that, not less. We're not living in a contracting universe. We're living in an expanding universe, and expansion is all tied to change. So you can't resist change. So if you're starting in something new, you got to recognize that change is going to be constant. Your attitude about it is going to be so vital. And the attitude has to be one, again, of not only embracing change, and being open to it, but also embracing this idea that you're going to suck at it for a while.
Yes.
And even when you're good at something, even when you're like approaching mastery, I'll say, at something, you're still going to have your moments where you suck at it. You're still going to have those moments where you're on a growth edge. And frankly, if you're not on a growth edge, you've stopped growing, and you're probably contracting then. And a contraction is not good in business. It's not good it doesn't feel good in our hearts. It doesn't feel good as human beings. Our souls don't want us to contract. So, that's mindset, if you will, but it's vital mindset. It's like, building a house on a foundation that's made of, something firm and steady, and as opposed to trying to build it on sand. So to me, that's foundational. I know it's also, again, it's not a tactical thing,
Mhm.
but if you look at every place in your business that you could just improve by 1%,
Mhm.
every little place in your business that you can make a tiny improvement, and your attitude and your mindset can always be looking for and embracing a 1% change for the better, over time, what you see is businesses improve, and sometimes they improve dramatically,
Mhm.
simply because of that one thing.
Mhm.
I share a story about a gentleman that took over for the British cycling team in 1998, a guy by the name of Dave Brailsford. He was their performance director starting in 1998 at a time when that team had not won a gold medal since 1908. So it was
Wow.
a team that was not doing well, to put it mildly. They sucked. All right. But by 2004, they won 2 medals. By 2008, they won more medals than any other team in the Olympics in cycling. Um, and that's attributed to a change in philosophy. That philosophy of, hey, we'll commit to 100 tiny changes,
Mhm.
and everybody becomes responsible for that change good. Let's look at every little tiny place we can make even a tiny 1% change for the better. That when everybody's committed to that, the individual leaders as well as everybody else on the team, what you see is this profound this transformative effect of that philosophy. And I
Wow.
think that's something that, again, you can't go wrong if you start with that foundation.
Wow, that's great. And that speaks to mindset, like 100%. Yeah,
It
mindset.
it does for sure.
Hmm. Now, in this current time of pandemic, what would you tell someone who questions their decision to start a business?
You're normal. You know what I mean? It's nothing unusual about questioning the decision to start a business. It's about whether or not you truly want to. You know, the again, if you're waiting for that sort of I prefer to be safe and secure, and therefore my behaviors will reflect that desire to be safe and secure. You might take a job in that instance. You might go back to school. Nothing wrong with that. If what you want and what you crave is unlimited earning potential, freedom, the ability to go and come as you please, to really make your way in the world without um, without a certain level of restriction, um, then to feel that way, you've got to take actions that will lead you to experience those feelings. Um, and to me, those actions usually involve starting something on your own.
Hmm.
When you start something on your own, you start to feel ownership of it. You start to feel free. You're a slave to it too. We're all trapped in some regard in our little cage where we go, this business doesn't allow me, like I'm working my own little business morning, noon, and night. I'm working on the weekends. You're really prisoner to your business. But it's not a lot different than, like, if you have a child. I mean, you don't abandon a child. I mean,
Right.
that's not where, that's not in the manual of being a good parent. You stick with that child, even if that child might have some hard times in life, or anything like. So your business is like a baby.
True. True.
It really is.
Hmm.
It will test you. It will cry in the middle of the night. It will be inconsolable. It will throw up all over you. It'll do all that stuff.
I love that.
And again, you don't abandon it when the times are difficult. You have to know going in that it's not necessarily easy, but it is also very fulfilling. As a
Mhm.
parent of 4, I can say, as difficult as parenting is on a, I don't want to say on a good day, but it's not easy to be a parent. Um, and yet all those difficulties or all those challenges, um, knock on wood, we've been able to handle them, my wife and I, and I know people have some really great big challenges with their kids sometimes. And um, the dividend, the fulfillment, the joy to see that baby begin to walk, that baby stand on their own 2 feet, think for themselves, uh, develop their own philosophies of life, get out on their own and make it, and be a good human. I mean, how do you can't even put into words that what that feels like. And that's what a business gives you as well.
Right.
But it takes that same level of nurturing and of patience, relentlessness, holding tight to the context, to the container, maintaining integrity.
Mhm.
These are difficult things, they're tested, especially in a pandemic, but in any time.
Right.
But when you hold to those things, you end up having that joyful moment, those many joyful moments.
What do you think, like right now, are some steps that uh, our listeners could take to accelerate their growth and maximize their finances, kind of in this current state that we're in?
Well, I think you've got to be careful when it comes to finances. You know, there's there's a level at which you just have to know that slow and steady wins the race. That's an old cliche, or you know, maybe it's more than that. It's true. I don't know where it all began. It could be, you know, that it was in a children's book or something. It may be, you know,
Yeah,
that
the
it
care
first.
and the tortoise.
Yeah, right, exactly. And um, but it is absolutely a true point. It's the moral of that story is that if we try to get rich quick, we're probably more likely to get broke quick. And I've seen that, and I know you've seen it in your, you know, you've seen it more times than you know either of us probably care to recall, because it always happens when markets shift. You know, when there's high, you know, people are making a lot of money in the stock market or in the real estate market. Everybody thinks this is how I'm gonna you know make it quick. Um, and I'm not suggesting that there aren't opportunities even now when the market is, you know, moving higher. It seems like on a daily basis,
Mhm.
but you have to recognize that first there's two things. One is getting in the game is a good idea, but getting in the game where you are diversifying and you don't have all your eggs in one basket makes sense.
Right.
Also, having the eggs be eggs that if you happen to not, you know, if they don't hatch,
Yes, if they crack.
you're okay.
Yeah.
Like you're legitimately not going to lose too much sleep. Nobody likes to lose money. I don't like to lose money. But even just recently, my wife and I were looking at some of the things to do with cryptocurrency, and you know, we'd known about it for 4 or 5 years and had opportunities to get in and do stuff. And you know, we're looking at doing a little bit now in that space, but we're going to use eggs that are not, if they didn't hatch, we're not going to lose sleep about it. Not going to be happy about it, but because again, you know, it's earning is,
Right.
you can, it takes a lot longer to earn money typically than it does to spend it
Right.
or to invest it unwisely.
Absolutely.
And so I just feel like, you know, for people these days, you have to remember that slow and steady wins the race concept,
Hmm.
and spread things out, and not, you know, in the aggregate, not in any one asset class, but even in the aggregate,
Hmm.
that if the eggs didn't hatch or, you know, what have you, you lost your principal in something, that it wouldn't cause you a financial hardship.
Right.
That's what happened in 2008 when everybody was, you know, writing down, I make $500,000 a year so that they could buy their 10th condo, and nobody was checking because it wasn't a part of the rules to check it.
That's right.
And then when the market turned around, people couldn't afford to keep their homes, and the rest is kind of a, you know, an ugly history.
Hmm.
So, you know, yeah, I think that's just, and timing is always vital. And so, you know, if it's not the right time for somebody at the moment to get in, then there's nothing wrong with putting your money into um, a very safe and secure vehicle and waiting for the right opportunity,
There you
because markets, like, they're like waves on the ocean, and or like, you know, any number of other things that go up and go down. And it's a good idea, if you're not sure and you're not feeling confident, to sit and watch, observe, learn, pay attention, collect your eggs, so that at a certain point you want to put a few in the, you know, get involved, and you can get involved.
great.
I know that it's a really difficult question in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
you know, because I think that kids, especially kids, should learn early that to get involved and invest early in even some basic things is really a game changer long term. Because when you say slow and steady wins the race, if you're 50 years old starting, slow and steady, you don't have your race time is different. Your time horizon is different than somebody who's 19 years old, and you go, yeah, put your money in one of these um, you know index fund type instruments, a mutual fund that's based on the S&P 500 or whatever, and you go, because 40 years from now, 50 years from now, that money, $100 a month, going to be worth a lot of money. It's just that simple, right? We
Yep.
want your kids to know that. But folks that have a shorter time horizon, it's a little different conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So last but not least, the focus of my podcast is to educate, motivate, and inspire entrepreneurs and/or wannabe entrepreneurs. So give me one thing that can educate them. You've been really doing that the whole half an hour, but one thing to educate, one thing to motivate, and one thing to inspire.
Well, I mean, the educate piece, I think, is reading. It's really vital that we are constantly reading things, and they can be a variety of stuff, like a diverse group of things. Read a book about habits, read a book about investing, read a book about, like I was just reading this book, scientific research on our propensity to lie, the honest truth about being dishonest. Fascinating. Well, what I didn't expect to get out of this book was that it was talking about how when we are depleted, tired, exhausted, we tend to lie more. We tend to make poor decisions, and a whole other thing. And our business is very much about resilience training.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're depleted, you're not resilient. And so the connection between our propensity to make mistakes and to even lie and cheat or to fudge things when we're tired is really important to our body of work. So here I'm reading a book that seemingly has nothing to do with what I'm most interested in from a business standpoint.
Right.
And yet I found this one chapter in there that was so darn on point, and I use it all the time now. So reading is educate. To motivate, well, motivation is something I think that we find in different areas. I mean, I find it in music. I find it in being near the ocean or being in the ocean. I like to surf. So I feel like that's something we know about ourselves, what motivates us. It could be walking in the woods. It could be, whatever it might be for everybody. Again, music is, poetry, whatever. Find that thing that motivates you, and then utilize it, use it, make time for it. Don't just leave it to chance that you get motivated. In the ordinary course, something happens and motivates you. It's like, seek out the motivation. And from an inspiration standpoint, I think for me, the first 10 minutes of the day is the most important 10 minutes of the day. And I use a particular process as a morning ritual to inspire myself at the beginning of the day. So I recommend that people pick something or some things to do within the first 10 minutes of the day that are not really about getting on your phone, checking your text messages and emails and whatever else maybe on social media, but instead take that first 10 minutes of the day and make that your inspiration, that inspiration for you. And that could be prayer, it could be meditation, it could be setting out your own affirmations or declarations for the day, how the day, how you want the day to unfold. But those 10 minutes are vital. And that's the most inspiring 10 minutes of the day for me every single day.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thanks for all of your words of wisdom. Listen, how can my people get in touch with your people?
Our people.
Our people. That's right. That's right.
That's so cool. Well, we have a podcast, as you said. You can find it at adammarkel.com/podcast. It's called The Conscious Pivot. And it is, I think, a wonderful resource to people who are pivoting, who are making changes or in transition and looking to also develop their own personal and professional resilience. So that's a great place for people to connect. And on the website, adammarkel.com, you can find out more about things like our books and the programs that we developed and lead all over the globe. And it's just been such a joy to spend this time with you.
Same here. And they can hit you up on Twitter and Facebook as well.
Oh my goodness. And if there are questions that flow, out of this discussion,
Mhm.
LinkedIn's a great place to connect with me and,
LinkedIn.
provide, question there. But Twitter, Facebook, I'm on all that social stuff.
Social media stuff. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you so much for your time. Tell Brandy and your girls I said hello, and it's
Oh,
just been really good to talk with you. I'm so excited that you came on. Thank you so much. And we'll have
this,
to catch up outside of this.
we will indeed. And you just have a wonderful rest of your day.
You
Thank
do
you.
the same. Thank you. You've made my day perfect. Take good care.